Oh, hi there. So in case you hadn't heard about it until now, I'll be talking to you about Microbial Combat in this video, which is a dueling card game revolving around the topics of microbiology and immunology. And yeah, so here I'll be explaining to you how the game is played and hopefully getting you hyped up to play as soon as you can. Let's dive right into it. So as it is a dueling card game, you play against one other player, and your goal is to defeat them by bringing them from 10 defense down to 0. And you will do this with organisms. Yeah. And so to get to the point where you can, reduce their defense points, do them damage, you need to first play your organism. So this is called inoculation in the game. So to take them from your hand and put them on the board, they must do this before you can attack with them. And so to do this action of putting them on the board, you need to spend ATP. And ATP is the currency of the game. And this is the resource you need to manage because you need to pay ATP to play all the cards in the game. So in the game, there are different types of organisms. There are, for example, bacteria, which are identified by this symbol on the top right of the card. Moreover, for any organism or any type of card for that matter, below their picture, you get a breakdown of which kind of categories of cards they fall into. And this might be referred to by other cards, and here it's nice and clear. Other types of organisms include viruses, and here again they have their own symbol. And then there are human cells, and here we've got a neutrophil, for example, which we see besides being a human cell, it is more specific an immune cell. It's a white blood cell that roams around in your blood looking for any intruders. So as you see, they have a general layout that is more or less the same. And you see that on the top left of each image, you will see a number, a Roman numeral in gold, which tells you what their ATP inoculation cost is. So this is the price, the number of ATP that you need to pay to inoculate this card, to take it from your hand and put it on the board in your inoculation zone. And we'll explain this further in a minute. So ATP, you start off in the first round, you have 1 ATP. In the second round, you get 2 ATP. In the third round, 3, and so on. And this ATP doesn't carry over from one round to the other. So if you didn't spend ATP from the previous round, you don't have that now on top of the 3 ATP because it's round 3. No, you just have those 3 ATP that you have for this round. So if you don't spend it, you lose it. So be sure to spend it wisely. And for any other types of cards, you must also pay for them. So yeah, we'll get more into what these cards are, but generally they just support your organisms. So now I hope this is not too overwhelming, but here we've got the board, basically what it will look like when you're playing, very similar to how we play when you are playing it online or when you're playing it in IRL. So this is what it looks like roughly. So we have 2 people facing off against each other. We have Batman versus Superman, and each of them have their inoculation zone. This purple zone indicated here, and in the middle there's the infection zone. And so the way it works is that each player's inoculation zone is where they first must inoculate, put down their organisms. So they must put it here. You cannot put them directly in the infection zone normally. There are exceptions to the rules, but it'll be stated clearly when it is an exception. And the infection zone, you want to move your organisms, generally at least some, to the infection zone because this is the only place that you can attack your opponent from. So organisms in the infection zone can attack your opponent, but if they are still in your inoculation zone, they can't do that yet. They need to first move there. So here Batman is considering playing this card, which is Escherichia coli, which we saw earlier. And to play it, we see it has 1 ATP cost. So Batman needs to spend 1 of his 6 ATP to move it from his hand into the inoculation zone, inoculating it. And if he wants to then move forward with E. coli, he needs to pay a different ATP price. So as he moves this card into the infection zone, he pays the action ATP price. So this is typically it's different. This is a smaller price here. It happens to be the same in this example, but this is the price that you pay to move or attack with an organism. So if you're moving like this from the inoculation zone into the infection zone, you pay this price. If you're attacking then your opponent, then you pay again this price. If you're attacking another card like this, again, you pay that price. If you want to move an organism within the same zone, to be instead of on the left of one card, on the right, or all the way over between two other cards, then again you pay this price once to do that. You can also move backwards if you wish. And one important thing to mention at this point is that the so-called 2-action rule. So any organism can only do 2 actions in a given turn. And inoculation cancels one of those actions. So in one round, an organism can be inoculated, and then that was 1 action. It can move into the infection zone, 2nd action, but it can then go on and attack your opponent. That would be 3 things, 3 actions, and that's not allowed in the game. So alternatively, it could be inoculated in 1 round. Then in the next round, it can be moved into the infection zone, 1 action, and then attack your opponent's 2nd action. That's okay. And one thing I should mention also is that an organism can, besides attacking your opponent, as was shown here just now, it can attack organisms in the same zone, like this, but it also can attack organisms from an adjacent zone. So long as they're in neighboring zones, E. coli, for example, can attack this neutrophil even if they're not in the same zone. So long as they're not, they don't have a zone in between them. And this is, basically how it works, what you can do, when you can do it, kind of, for at least for organisms. We'll get into more detail. 2-action rule we have covered. And then one thing that it's important to note is that you can inoculate a card, so put it down from your hand onto the board, an organism face up, like was shown here, or you can put it face down so that you see the card back on top. And so when you put it face down, then your opponent doesn't know what it is. He only knows, or she'll only know what how much you paid for it. And the benefit of this is that you can play mind games, maybe you can bluff a little, but also when you wish, you can flip it around even during your opponent's turn, and it can then now be a surprise. And during your opponent's turn, it's useful because then you can trigger one of its abilities this way in a surprising manner and stop something or inhibit something that your opponent has been doing. So react to them during their turn, because otherwise you are not able to do much. If your card is already like this and it has an ability that you can use now and you haven't done it before, you can, of course, if even if it's reusable, you can, whenever you want, use that ability during your opponent's turn. We'll cover more of that in a little while. So blocking, so this is a very common ability that organisms have, and we'll get into what abilities are exactly and where you can read about them. But this ability, if we go back here to E. coli, is an ability that E. coli has, and here it reads, so block, turn cards 90 degrees to intercept attacks to organisms adjacent and or to you if one adjacent position is free. So I hope, so I'll explain them because they're very common and I still haven't phrased it correctly. So here what this means is that, so this card, which is turned 90 degrees, we presume has this ability to block. And it is, if neutrophil wanted to attack this E. coli here, it would not be able to do it. Instead, its attack would be redirected to this card that is doing the blocking. And then they would engage in combat, you would do the maths, which we'll get to in a second. And additionally, if this neutrophil wanted to attack Batman, it could not, because this organism is blocking it. However, because this position is free. However, if another card was here instead, so there was a card on either side of this blocking card, those two would be protected, but Batman wouldn't be. So as long as you've got a position free next to a blocking card, it's also protecting you. And so this can be additional line of defense, and it's pretty common. Okay, lastly, there's this environment zone, which is for environment cards, which unless you're building your own deck, they're not that useful generally. So I have left them out of most decks right now that you can play with. So don't worry about that at all. So now combat. So what does actually happen when E. coli attacks neutrophil or vice versa? So it's always the same thing. Whoever is attacking, it happens the same way. And what happens is that, so each of these organisms, they have their own defense points. So this is kind of like their life value, their life points, their defense. And when this goes to 0, they're dead. If it's above 0, they're still alive, they're still hanging in there, and they can still attack and do all the things that we've talked about. So right, and each organism will also have an attack value. And so what happens is when these two attack each other, you subtract the attack of one organism, for example here E. coli has 2, from the defense of the other. For example, the neutrophil's defense of 3. So in this example, 2 minus 3 gives you 1, so that this neutrophil would still be alive. And in the other way, the 2 defense of E. coli will not withstand the neutrophil's attack of 3. So that would give you -1. And so E. coli would actually die, and the neutrophil will survive with a defense of 1. So whether you play IRL or online, there will be these tokens available so you can keep track of the stat values that have changed. So here the neutrophil has taken some damage, so now it has 1 defense, and you can use these tokens to represent that. In addition, there are some other things, just to recap, that are shown on the cards. So again, the action ATP price. So if E. coli was attacking, it would have to pay 1. If neutrophil was attacking, it would have to pay 2. And so you only do this when you initiate the combat. And so this is shown here for attacking or for moving, but not for abilities, you pay this price. In addition, we have the inoculation price, which we've covered in detail. On the top left of an organism's card, or also for any card. And then below the picture, we have again a description of the categories that this organism falls into. Moreover, so the biggest part of the card is this text space at the bottom of the image, which tells you about an organism's abilities. So these vary from organism to organism. Some of them are very powerful, some have none. And so it pays to read them. So ones are very common, like block, and quite useful. Some are very specific, and so you have to read. And hopefully they explain themselves. If they don't, feel free to post a question, ask me, so that I can answer this. So in this example, E. coli would die. And there are further characteristics that describe microbes as shown here. So for example, one that is quite common is gram staining. So here we see that E. coli is gram negative, and so there are certain antibiotics which only affect certain types of bacteria, or these descriptors only come into effect when in regards to the effects of other cards. Other text that is in italics is not necessarily relevant, but it's just scientific information that might be interesting, as kind of like let you dive deeper into the lore of the game. And then we have these, if you ever see the symbol, this inverted colored defense token, this here. This represents basically a negative defense, so it means take away defense from whatever it is we're talking about. And so you might see this around in some cards, and yeah, just keep an eye out for it. Hopefully then it's clear to you what that means. Now, other types of cards include antibiotics and disinfectants, which are grouped together under attack cards, and they're basically, so they're like one use only, you pay for them, again, their ATP price, which they have, and then they have their effect, and that's it. Unless it says otherwise, it only lasts for that moment, basically. So for example, this antibiotic causes 2 damage, and you should read because it can only, for example, affect gram-positive bacteria. So you have to read whether it's a gram-positive or gram-negative. Look for the symbol somewhere on the card. If it's there, you're good. You can use this antibiotic. Moreover, some cards have effects like this one here. It has the effect called the bacteriostatic. So here, bacteria that are targeted are dormant until the next round. And so what this means is that this card that is dormant now cannot attack, cannot move, cannot do its ability, it cannot block, for example, and it's basically asleep for a while. It will not do anything until its next round. Then we have virulence factors, which fall in the big category of modifiers, but these are the most common ones, and they're basically like power-ups. So what they do is that they will make an organism stronger. So in this case, you pay 2 ATP to make a gram-negative, like E. coli, which we saw earlier, have more attack against human cells and your opponent. Then, let's say we have a big class of cards, which are called wild-type cards, which have various effects. Maybe you can draw a card, maybe you can, for example, protect yourself against certain types of attacks, and you pay the price. And what's so special about this type of card is that they also can be placed on the board. So instead of being one use basically, or being carried around on an organism like a power-up, they can be put down, face down, uncharacterized. So your opponent might think that they're an organism, and then they can be You can pay for them in one round, and then in the next round, during your opponent's turn, even, you can turn them around and activate them to react to something your opponent is doing. So you can do this similar thing with organisms, so reveal them and have their ability have effect, or also with wild type cards. And so this is one way that you can, these are the ways that you can react to something your opponent is doing during their turn. And again, to pay any of these cards, to play with them, you need to have pay their ATP price. Now we cover most of it just real quick. Now we have the basically the structure of the game, how it works. So one round consists of 2 turns, like in many other games. And so you begin the game with, you draw 5 cards from the deck, and you start with 10 defense points, and then you have 1 ATP in the first round. And every round, you get a number of ATP that equals the round that you are in. So if you're in the second round, you have 2 ATP, third round 3 ATP, and as I said earlier, it does not carry over from one round to the other if you don't use it. So when it's the beginning of your turn, you get the ATP now that you should have for that round, then you draw a card, and then you can do all of the things that we've mentioned. You can inoculate an organism in your inoculation zone. You can move organisms into the infection zone. You can attack other organisms or your opponent if you're able to. And you can play any number of other cards, so long as you've got the ATP to pay for them. Then, when it's your opponent's turn, they do the same. They get their ATP, they draw their card, and then the only thing that you can do during their turn is reveal cards that you had placed uncharacterized. You can flip them up and have their effects take place. If they had already been shown, you already see what they are. You can still trigger their abilities during your opponent's turn, so long as it says within the card text that you can, that, it's not a one-time thing that you've already used up, for example. Right. One thing I should mention, but I missed mentioning earlier, is that if an organism is being characterized, because it's been inoculated uncharacterized, so face down like this, if you want to then move forward with it, attack with it, you must review what it is so that you can do the maths. And if it moves into the infection zone, you need to show what it is. It can only stay uncharacterized in the inoculation zone if its ability hasn't come into effect, and if it has basically done nothing. So long as, for example, it gives you more ATP, or it increases the defense of adjacent organisms, any kind of ability that will be described on there, you need to show what it is. And that's it. So you'll uncover the card, and you get this hopefully surprising response to your opponent's action. And that's it. So hopefully that's enough information to get you guys playing, and you guys are hyped up for it. So I would say, dive right in, hopefully have fun. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me any way that you can. I'll be sure to make a FAQ page so that hopefully these common things that are not yet so well explained can be cleared up for you. And I'll also make a short video explaining how you can play online, so you can learn the controls. It should be much shorter this time. I look forward to hearing what you guys think of the game, and have fun dueling.